Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Today, I will be reviewing Nona the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. This is the third book in the Locked Tomb series. It is a queer sci-fi novel. The description says, "Her city is under siege. The zombies are coming back, and all Nona wants is a birthday party. In many ways, Nona is like other people. She lives with her family, has a job at her local school, and loves walks on the beach and meeting new dogs. But Nona's not like other people. 6 months ago, she woke up in a stranger's body, and she's afraid she might have to give it back. The whole city is falling to pieces. A monstrous blue sphere hangs on the horizon, ready to tear the planet apart. Blood of Eden forces have surrounded the last cohort facility and wait for the Emperor Undying to come calling. Their leaders want Nona to be the weapon that will save them from the 9 houses. Nona would prefer to live an ordinary life with the people she loves, with Pyrrha and Camilla and Palamedes, but she also knows that nothing lasts forever. And each night, Nona dreams of a woman with a skull-painted face." 4 stars, although I liked this one less than the previous 2. The biggest problem I had with this book is that it didn't feel like we were making any progress on the plot. It gave us plenty of important backstory and pieces throughout the book, but the main plot was primarily about Nona going about her day-to-day life, while Pyrrha, Camilla, and Palamedes tried to figure out if she was Harrow or Gideon. It wasn't necessarily boring, but it did feel like Muir was suddenly pumping the brakes on a story that had a lot of momentum. That isn't to say it served no purpose. I can't entirely say what the purpose is at this point, but I can see the edges of how it might come into play later. I'm not exactly disappointed, is what I'm saying. I just also really want to know what happens next. The smaller problem I had with this is that because Nona only has 6 months of memory, she came across as very childlike, and my mental reading voice kept skewing too young. I found myself having to frequently stop and remind myself that she was, technically, 19. The backstory was really interesting, though. Although, I'll admit I wasn't crazy about the way it was presented. For starters, I didn't entirely understand the framing device. The chapters with John always said, "in the dream," and Camilla asks Nona about the dreams she has every morning, so at first I thought it was her dreaming. But then she would have to be lying to Camilla, and that didn't seem right. Later, John addresses who he's talking to, and presumably the dreamer, by name, but I wasn't sure how that was supposed to work. Additionally, there were context clues in what he was saying that implied he was talking to someone else, which just confused me more. I think I mostly understand what was happening now that I've finished, but it's still a little fuzzy. I also really didn't like that all the names in John's story were presented as first initials and M-dashes. I'm not sure why Muir didn't just write the names. It was pretty obvious who the initials were, and I just filled them in for myself while I was reading because it was easier for me to keep track of the characters that way. The problem is that it took me a while to remember what name corresponded to C, and I never did remember who N might be. Also, since there are eventually 2 people who could be represented by A, I had a moment of confusion. It was only a moment, though, because I realized pretty quickly that John was only going to reference the first A by name, and the second strictly by his profession and relation to the other A. Ultimately, it wasn't that big a deal. I just wish Muir had used the names in the first place, and I'd love to hear an explanation as to why she didn't. I'm not sure there's much else to say about it that doesn't involve spoilers. So, those of you who don't want spoilers, now is the time to pause or close the video. For everyone else, let's talk details. I spent most of the book thinking Nona was Gideon. There were 2 main reasons for this. First, Harrow finished the last book sleeping in the tomb, so I didn't think she was in her body at the moment. Second, Nona seemed a lot more interested in sex and pretty ladies than Harrow generally seems to be. I think I eventually started to suspect there might be a third option, but I didn't have any context for deciding if that was feasible. So the end was kind of a surprise. John's bastard status got upgraded significantly through his backstory, which is impressive. I don't know how a person can go from wanting to save humanity / the planet to destroying the entire solar system in a matter of months, but he sure did. There's also a really solid chance that the reason he has been murdering and colonizing the entire universe is that he still wants to find and kill the billionaires' escape ships, which is just ridiculous. Honestly, I started to wonder why it even mattered well before they launched, and then John actively did much worse than they ever could have, rather than just letting them go and trying to fix things. And all that is setting aside the fact that he's an unreliable narrator, so he might actually be worse still. But hey, now I know why everyone thinks Alecto is a monster. She's not human, so she doesn't understand how to interact with things in a human way. Also why her eyes are funky. And I'm starting to think no one in these books is a decent judge of character. It doesn't seem like Alecto could have chosen a worse champion for her cause, that's for sure. I didn't really like the ending. I said in my last review that I couldn't wait for John to figure out that Harrow really did open the tomb, and I hoped that was on the page because it would be glorious. And I mostly stand by that, so I felt very robbed. I am a little confused about the tomb being opened, though. Like, Harrow did that. There just doesn't seem to be any way around it. And I figured it's to do with Gideon being there when her parents murdered everyone to make Harrow, so she's got some kind of loophole, but I'm not sure. I thought maybe we were working towards saying that Harrow didn't really open the tomb after all. But then Gideon didn't seem to do anything terribly relevant at the end, and it was Nona, in Harrow's body, that ultimately released Alecto, while Gideon was still standing on the other side of the lake. So I'm still a little confused on that front, and the last chapter didn't help clear things up. Here's hoping Book 4 will. I didn't like what Muir did with Gideon in this book. I'm hoping that she was just lying to get Ianthe to stand aside, but there are some indications that she wasn't. I really like Gideon, so having her suddenly just not care about hurting people, as she seemed to at the end of this book, was really unpleasant. I also don't really understand why John renamed her, other than issues with prior association with the name Gideon. I'm starting to worry that Muir might actually want me to like John. I sure hope that's not the case, because I never will, and if this series ends with him being forgiven, or even generally satisfied, I'll be pissed. I think that's more or less all of my thoughts. I'd still recommend this book. I'm going to read Nona the Ninth once it comes out, and my library lets me borrow it. At this point, I'd still recommend it, but there's definitely room for it to disappoint me before it's done. If you like this video, I hope you'll watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye!